Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, friends, enemies, and comrades, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are. This is Kenya Revolutionary for another day, for another session. Today, we'll be speaking of something slightly different, something slightly out of Kenya, an event that happened that's out of Kenya, but it can be related to what might happen to Kenya, or it can affect our politics. So we are just going to touch on it. And of course, we shall also do our daily rounds on the news in Kenya. All right. So as you know, the first order of business, if you still don't know, if you already subscribed, please like the video. And if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Okay. Now, today we are going to talk about how Kenyans react to Trump's assassination attempt yesterday. Something that has shocked the world. People are like, America is considered one of the greatest democracies of recent history. But for somebody, a presidential candidate who also happened to be an ex-president, was attacked. There was an attempt on his life. Now, some people might say it was staged. Some people say, whatever. I don't know. I still haven't made up my mind yet. I don't know. But if at all this was something legit, which it seems to be, who would want Trump dead? Who would want him gone? It's so funny because there's also an episode of The Simpsons, which, Simpsons is a weird show. And actually, there was sometimes back I was reading an article that showed that one of the writers of The Simpsons show, for those of you who watch Simpsons, are connected to, the intelligence community, which is Mossad and CIA, and they usually kind of know what's happening. I mean, The Simpsons predicted the helicopter crash with Kobe. So many stuff. They also had an episode about Trump getting assassinated. So they've always had some weird episodes that kind of predict the future, So that's an interesting take. But nevertheless, how do Kenyans feel about this whole situation? There's some people who believe that a change in the presidency would be something that would affect Kenya perhaps positively, because from the Twitter sphere, there's a lot of accusation. People accusing Megan Whitman, the current US ambassador to Kenya, of being the de facto president. She is the one giving Ruto orders to follow. For those of you who don't know Megan Whitman, she ran for governor for California, but kind of her candidacy withdrew her candidacy after she was embroiled in a kind of scandal about one of her house help being undocumented, a topic that's a really hot topic issue in California about undocumented workers. Okay, so she withdrew from that, and there she is. A few years later, she's the U.S. ambassador to Kenya, who is also former CEO of eBay, former CEO of Hewlett Packard, I believe. So she knows one thing or two about running companies. And Kenya in itself has been run like a company, and it's been run to the ground. Of course, I've been saying that Kenya is greatly influenced by multinational corporation, big corporations that really benefit from this IMF World Bank loans that Kenyans are taking. I've been preaching that since, I started this channel. So you can go look at those videos and see. And so these same people who run these multi-corporations, the Shells, the Amoco, whatever the case is, the big companies. Let me just say that. These are the guys. Sorry, Kaizori, and thank you for the Ninio. Okay, is it better now? Is it better, Kaizorian? Is it better now? Am I better off? I've been speaking to, I hope I'm better now. Okay. Is it better? All right. So I was saying, like, these big multi-corporation corporations, these are the guys who actually have a say. These are the Western powers who are always involved in third world country coup d'etats and policy making. And the mercenaries that you see are funded in Congo to, protect their interest, as they say. So yes, so that's why I was just wondering. I'm just wondering, what do people think? Again, I usually tell my friends, again in Kenya, that a change of guard in the US, if we were to have a new president, that may not necessarily mean that their policy towards that country may change. Trump can become the president tomorrow, but I don't think the US policy or the US dealings with Kenya as far as their trade arrangements, and might not be the same, might not be that different. I'll give you a quick example. When Obama was the president for 8 years, when he became president in 2008, everyone in Africa was happy that, oh, finally we have somebody who can relate to the African problems, the son of Africa, and everyone was excited. But the man ended up removing him, along with Hillary Clinton, ended up removing Muammar Gaddafi, an African hero, an African giant. Muammar Gaddafi was not a saint by any means, but Gaddafi had a vision for Africa, a united Africa, an Africa that is independent of European powers, having its own strong military, having its own gold-backed currency, not relying on the dollar, and trading within themselves, avoiding this whole unfair trade deals with the West. So, unfortunately, Gaddafi was taken off by Obama's administration. You can remember the video where Hillary Clinton bragged about how she conquered and how Gaddafi was killed. Now, Obama did not start there. He went on and started a war in Syria, where Russia had to clean up the house and bring order in Syria. So anyway, who would want President Trump gone? That's what I'm being wondering. Why would they attack him? I know in the last elections, or the previous election when he became president after Obama, he was labeled everything. People were calling him racist, everything and everything under the sun. Okay? So, but he ended up winning. We remember when Hillary Clinton was forced to make that speech in New York that was uncomfortable for her, but she conceded anyway. Actually, she never conceded, if I remember. It was only what's that guy with I don't know, I forgot his name. Anyway, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and get started. Like the video, share, comment, and subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Let's get started. Maggie Muturi saying the mighty has fallen. There's a lot of the general consensus within the international community. They feel like the West is losing its power. The Roman Empire, which is the West, basically, the old Roman Empire. The Roman Empire never fell. It just changed its faces, okay, through the Vatican. The Vatican still control lots of things in this world, okay? But what I'm trying to say is this, that a lot of people are saying that the West is actually falling. This is the last stage of an empire, the American empire, before it falls, because you can see the rise of China, the rise of Russia, the rise of India, and so forth. And now they are caught up in this war that's about to break out. Well, it's going on in Ukraine, but it might spread into other countries, not just Ukraine. As we speak right now, North Korea and China are training their troops just outside of Poland, getting ready for possibly ground engagement, fights, war between NATO forces and Russia. Of course, North Korea and China will be fighting on the Russia's side. Chechen people, Chechen rebels, they swore to fight side to side with Russia. And NATO, led by United States and France, and surprise, surprise, we might be asked to send troops in Ukraine because Ruto signed up as a non-NATO ally. Basically, since Kenya is not in the northern hemisphere, let me just say that, northern part, because it's North Atlantic treaty, which makes NATO, whatever the case is. The northern countries, west basically, led by United States, France, Germany, and so forth. Ruto was signed that treaty with NATO, which means that if a member state, if United States or France or any NATO member wants help from Kenya, whether it's militarily, as far as men, or building an airbase, or building a military whatever, they can do so because the treaty is in place between William Ruto, who represents the state, the Republic of Kenya, joining with the NATO forces. So if Russia was to decided to attack any NATO allies, Kenya can be attacked by Russia, because Russia will be looking at Kenya as a NATO ally. So that is the kind of danger that this President Ruto put us through. He never thought that through, I guess. He only thought about his stomach. But like I say, if you know well, these people are always forced, their hands, their puppets, who are used by these Western powers to do what they are told. So anyway, I'm personally worried. America is kind of on a free fall. Maybe Trump might be the president to help bring it back to its old glory. Okay, but as someone who's not from America, what would American glory means? Does it mean the old hegemonic rule by America, the imperialist expedition that American and British had before? Is that what we are looking at? So when we are talking about America's being great again, what does it mean? Personally, I think America can be great without its military being used to conquer the small nations all over the world, whether it's in the Black Sea, Red Sea, Africa, Asia. You see, they're having troubles with China over Taiwan. They're having trouble with Russia over Ukraine. They're having trouble with China, Russia, and other nations in Africa. Look at everywhere. The American forces are stretched. And I think they are going through what the USSR went through. Remember, in the 80s, USSR, the former, Russia was part of that federation. What I'm trying to say is this: the reason why USSR fell and was fragmented militarily, it is because they had a huge military budget that they could not sustain. They had military everywhere. And Reagan, among other presidents who started fighting right after the death of Kennedy, they realized that the only way we can subdue the USSR is to help break it into small countries. And not only that, we shall stretch them militarily. Okay? So we can drain them economically fast. Because if you don't have money, you'll have no money to pay your military men. You'll have no money to maintain those nuclear warheads. And if you don't have money, you cannot pay your workers. So anybody who comes with a better deal shall leave you. And that's what the strategy that the US used throughout the Cold War to bankrupt the USSR, which finally, fell and fragmented into these small nations, Ukraine, Yugoslavia, and so forth, and so forth. You know the story. So this is what US is doing. Kaisorian wants the link. I'll put him in so I can hear from him. I'll bring him in so we can hear what he has to say. Let me put the link there so you can join me on the stream and give your opinion. Okay. Kazorian, just turn your camera on if you can. If you can't, that's fine. I'll understand. But there's the link. There's the link. There's the link. All right. So like I say, I was listening to Scott Ritter. If you don't know Scott Ritter, he was one of those guys who were involved in checking back in 2003, 2002. He worked with Mohammed al-Badai in the IEA. They were going to check Iraq to make sure if Iraq had nuclear weapons. Karibu Kaiserian Empire. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Kwaje?
Niko fiti. Niambie, Trump mnataka kuua, ni Ruto ndio anataka kumuua ama ni nani?
Najua sisi wa Nairobi hatuwezi ongelea too much about Ruto, but at least okay. I'm right. However, I think this whole situation is kind of interesting, right? Now, you can add your own opinion from my comments, but I remember when Obama was in power with Hillary Clinton, his Secretary of Defense. What happened is that's when they actually took off one of the most Pan-African presidents. Whether you agreed with him or you liked him, whether you think he was Pan-Arabism, then they rejected him, then he became Pan-African, that's all fine. But Gaddafi had a simple plan, right? It was using gold and to pay off the debts. That's why Libya had no debts, because you remember we live in something called Euro-dollar system, for those who are listening who may not understand. That basically means is African countries and global South generally, our currency is not worth much in the international market, meaning we can't just print money and pay the debts. We have to earn the money. So this leads to things, for example, Kenya, we are forced to grow tea and coffee to sell it to Wazungu so that we can actually get the dollars back so that we can access the economy, right? So Gaddafi said, hey, this system doesn't work for us. We're going to pay off the debts using our gold. And after that, we will finance a new African bank using gold, because a lot of African countries have gold and they had a huge reserve. So they were willing to front the cost for this new currency. Now, of course, the problem is Gaddafi, I don't do victim blaming. However, I believe in, learning from our past mistakes so we don't make the same problem. He did not gain enough African support from powerful leaders within Africa. So what that basically means is he was able to be infiltrated. And, we know how America does things. We know the regime that did it. Obama, as I said, it is what it is. He was used by those guys, whether he was a mastermind, it doesn't matter. The point is Obama, Hillary Clinton, that whole organization wanted to get rid of Gaddafi. Now, for Trump is an interesting guy. People can say he's racist. Maybe he is. That doesn't matter to me as much, though. As an African, as a Kenyan, what matters is his stance on foreign policy. Now, Trump, at least vocally, and from what we saw, he was even willing to meet with the North Korean president, the Russian president. Trump is more of a very pro-American guy, meaning he doesn't really have the American imperialism that has really been kind of taken over America recently. So I believe that actually this year, again, these globalists, these oligarchies, all these powerful companies do want to take him out. And if they can take him out, they can obviously put someone like Biden. And we know Biden, he has other issues. He's much more controllable because he, again, is part of the establishment. Trump, whether you like him or not, he's not part of the establishment. He's part of a different kind of establishment, right? A billionaire, but he's not part of the political establishment. So as I said, I believe this is something that was definitely paid off by some kind of oligarchs, these corporations who do obviously understand that if Trump goes into power, these deals for these resources in Africa and the global South at large will not go the way that they want. They need someone who they can continue to propel their ideas.
Now, how does, let's just say Trump becomes the president, does that affect our relationship?
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I meant to ask you, do you think this will change the relationship between Washington and Nairobi? Let's say Ruto's regime and Trump's regime. Trump might not be in good terms with Ruto because of his the rampant corruption that's in Kenya and so forth, so forth. Do you think this will change, or does the U.S. usually, maybe they might not care much about Kenya because I don't know if because I think Kenya is a strategic country. They can use their base to do their darts in Somali, Congo, and all that stuff. So they need Kenya is important. Okay, so will Trump actually force Ruto to make changes as far as the corruption, the killings, and all this stuff, or will he come down hard on him and maybe might look at somebody else to
Yes.
even help Gen Z? Go ahead.
Yeah, great question. So, for the record, this whole protesting, I'm very neutral. The reason I'm neutral is, again, publicly I'm neutral, right? My private stance is something else. However, I'll answer it this way. I believe that, as you stated, America is not like Kenya or, no, let's say Uganda, right? There's different levels of dictatorship and, autocratic sort of leadership. So if you look at Uganda, Museveni has full control. There was a recent brother who was apparently, according to the news that I read, sent to prison for 6 years because he, said things about the president and his family and his children. In Kenya, that wouldn't happen because of the way that our constitution works. Uganda doesn't have a constitution. So Kenya has a constitution, but we're now in the teething process, right? This was created in 2010. It's yet to seek to reach a certain level of standardization. A simple example is whether, again, you agree with this or not. Joey was sentenced to death. However, according to the constitution, you cannot take someone's life. So we're still dealing with contradiction, even at court level, between whether we're following the constitution or not. So I'm getting to the point. With America works more of a decentralized system, meaning the president doesn't have as much power as actually the Senate and the Congress at large. And I think Ruto, because remember, it wasn't just Ruto and Biden who agreed on, Kenya's new status as non-NATO major ally, similar to Israel and Morocco. It was actually the Congress had to allow it to happen, to pass through. So I believe the Kenya status won't change too much. Even if Trump comes into power, perhaps there wouldn't be as much handshaking and backdoor deals that perhaps may be happening right now. But I do believe that things will continue. One reason why is this: Houthis, right? Kenya's now stance as major non-NATO ally means that we have to be forced into this Houthi rebel fight, right? That basically Kenya, exactly, Yemenis. What that means is Kenya is putting itself at the forefront of acting as a legal actor in this process, because Houthis work within the Indian Ocean. So America doesn't have jurisdiction in the Indian Ocean. So Kenya does. So that's why they're using Kenya there. And it's the most stable country within that region that they, again, have a capitalistic historical approach. They can't use Tanzania because of the Ujamaa, right? These guys are far more socialist leaning. Meanwhile, Kenya, they did put in certain puppets. I know you guys love Jomo Kenyatta, and fine, it was great. But the real leader was Tomboya, and they got rid of him. So I'm just saying that even within our own, go ahead.
No, I was just saying Tomboya was actually was close to JFK, who also ended up being killed. And you're right. Jomo Kenyatta was it's known by now. If any Kenyan doesn't know that, then it's a shame. He was a British puppet. Like, that guy was literally a governor for the British government. Kenya. But sorry, go ahead. You.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Shout out. So, as I mentioned earlier, even within our own so-called freedom movements, certain people were put in instead of other people because America did not want us going down a socialist route like Tanzanians did, or other countries, Thomas Sankara, all these kinds of things. So what I'm trying to say here is that Kenya right now, whether I agree or disagree with Ruto's plan to shake hands with America and make us basically the black African puppet in this stance, we already shook the hand. We now need to basically make sure we survive this. Now, if it's possible to reverse it, great. However, here's the thing, right? The moment we start prosecuting Houthis, Yemenis rebels. We're already doing it with Somali pirates, right? But that's different. That's more of a geopolitical strategy for us because of the terrorist attacks. However, Houthis have not attacked Kenyan. They've not attacked Kenyan ships. They're attacking ships going to Israel, like Maersk, the Dutch company. So the point is, we're entering into a war that we don't have any stake in. And if America, let's say, remember, we're not a NATO ally. We're not part of NATO. We're, some new name just to kind of say, hey, we will kind of help you, but we might not, right? We may give you a few drones, but we might not. So my point is this: we're entering into a war that we might not be able to deal with at the end of this whole cabal, and I find that dangerous. And regarding Trump, I do believe that yes, it is these people. I'm not going to mention names, but just know, the U.S. ambassador in Kenya is a billionaire, right? She has over $3 billion, and she's very close to, certain powerful politicians within Kenya. And those are the kinds of people that have been opening up these deals for us to sign regarding peace, security, and also the money that will come in. So for me, yes, I think President Trump's assassination attempt definitely is led mostly because of geopolitical stance that he has. Namely, he went to actually try to meet Kim Jong-un. He's been meeting Putin for all the longest. And of course, these companies don't have anything positive when someone is out there trying to make deals with the enemy, right? They want America to be a military industrial complex, and they have their certain, what do you call it? Foreign affairs sort of strategy, and Trump is against it.
Okay. Now, regarding the president being involved with other countries as far as their influence or influencing how the two countries relate, I think Trump can do something. I don't think if he becomes the president, that is, I don't think Kenya is up there as far as things to do, priority. But I think it can be done because we can see, if we read history, how United States was really involved in Cuba, the whatever, before Batista, before he was removed by by Castro, and other South Asia countries where you see they use what's this guy's name that just died? This professor guy, Kissinger, Henry Kissinger. How they use Kissinger to take care of the coup d'etats that was happening in South America and all that stuff. But Kissinger was working as this guy in between. The president is using Kissinger to do the dirty work through the CIA and the coup d'etats that were happening. So I think if the president, Trump became the president, I think if he really wanted to change how Kenya, and Africa, that is, operates as far as this whole the corruption stuff and the loaning system that they have between IMF and World Bank, I think he can do it. I mean, Russia is doing it, but in a different way. They are you see what happens in Sahel nations. They are helping them militarily to, help them become independent. So maybe I would kind of disagree with you slightly by saying it does not necessarily depend on the American Congress to approve what Trump might do to help Kenya. While on the books, that's yes, it should be like that. But if there was any special concentration on Kenya, Trump can do something through, his, whether it's CIA, not FBI. FBI is more like in the United States, but CIA, and make things happen. What do you think?
Okay, yeah. So now that you mentioned, obviously, the other, yes.
Sorry, you're breaking up a little bit. Oh, are you there? I've lost Mr. Kaiserian. Are you there? Hello? I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, sorry, my connection went down for a second. Yeah, so once you bring in these the context of the alphabet organizations, yes,
it can be
100%. Trump does have access to controlling them, yes, and of course, yeah. So I agree with you. I think whatever happens on paper is very different than what happens on the actual ground.
Okay, now
I think, go ahead.
No, I just want to say, I don't know how much attention you pay to American politics, but there are people who are kind of still they're skeptical about this whole Trump being anti-globalists, the unconventional politician, because they mentioned this APAC. If you're familiar with APAC, it's Israel, the American something something that they give a lot of money. Yeah, they give a lot of money to these politicians. So some people feel like his relationship with Israel, I mean, we love Israel, but we know their history. So I'm just saying, like, some people might feel like he might be a puppet as the rest of the politicians, American politicians, who take their orders from Netanyahu. Probably. What do you think about that?
Okay, great point. Actually, I would disagree with them. Right? I don't think I've seen any evidence that Trump is a puppet for anyone other than himself and America. And the reason I say this is because now I get the whole Israel thing, but that's a long-standing. If you look at the Bible Belt, especially his supporters, these are the people who believe in Israel being the land of Christianity and God. So it would not make strategic sense for him to go against his main voter base. His voter base is not necessarily, these so-called liberal areas, with all these other new age progressive ideas. So I think it's not him being a puppet. It's him sort of understanding the strategy of how to actually maintain power rather than lose it by basically, being non-tactical.
Okay, so he's just not using them, but like he doesn't want to, be at odds with them in order to get to the power. Then he will do whatever he needs to do when he gets there. Okay, interesting. Now, what's your take on this Sahel nations? I think that's for now, a lot of young people are looking at this, Mali, Burkina Faso, and what's the third one? I forgot. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. They're looking at it like that's where we want. I mean, not necessarily a military coup d'etat, but they're looking at moving away from the West, and maybe looking at East Russia to kind of help them, be independent, because it seems like the British and Americans will still stick with their old method of using World Bank and IMF to tie us down, to enslave us, basically. What do you think? Is that a better way of going through it? Maybe friendly, popular military intervention?
Okay, good question. So generally, when it comes to IMF, World Bank, and I am very skeptical of even BRICS, China, or any other lender or potential lender that would come. Ultimately, I feel that unless Africa, or rather East Africa, we actually now become sovereign within our own regions, create our own currencies, and then we're able now to lend and trade with each other, that's when our currencies can grow stronger. IMF is one of the worst lending people, because they give us 10 plus interest rates. Meanwhile, they give European countries 2%. Just an example of some of the numbers that have happened previously. That is obviously predatory. World Bank is also similar. China tries not to give us such exuberant interest rates. However, China, what they do is something which I think is a bit more facetious at hand. And let me delve into it. If you look at the construction of Kenya's SGR, that thing was over budgeted by both China and the Kenyan government. The Kenyan government allowed the project to go through, even though the Germans and the Turkish, they were willing to give a much smaller quote. Now, what China does, which I think is just as nefarious as World Bank, is they represent the cost of the project, and then they don't even give us the money. So they give us a theoretical money that we have to pay back in which currency? Again, dollars. So they're not any better, right? They could give us a debt in the yuan, but they won't, because they keep consistently dividing the yuan for export metrics. So China gives us a debt in a currency that we can't pay back in unless we, instead of growing food, for example, in Kenya, we grow cash crops. So China's doing the same thing. Then also the project should have cost at least 35 to 40% cheaper, but they've inflated it. Not only that, they also use Chinese labor. So if you really look at the actual cost of the production of that SGR, it would have been much cheaper because it wasn't even Kenyan labor. So they didn't give us any money. They gave us a cost valuation. So we're paying back a loan in a cost valuation. The materials, they already have most of it. What I'm trying to say is, regardless of which geopolitical power is in play, we as Africans, specifically East Africa in this case, we're always going to be playing with that leverage. At a disadvantage unless we have leverage, and the leverage is we unionize, right? EAC should have a single currency, and it should be supported by things like gold or lithium or coltan, things that can be found within the region. Then it will not lose power, it will have control and all that. What that basically means is we could even leverage and say we'll take a loan in our own currency if we even had to. So until that happens, I believe regardless of which geopolitical power is in play, they're going to do the same thing. Now, the only thing I like about China, so-called BRICS and all these new emerging powers is it gives us an opportunity to have multiple vendors to go and shop on, as opposed to us having to take something from one person and having a so-called monopoly.
Yes, and also you forgot to mention China also, if you don't pay their loans on time, they'll tell you, hey, we'll operate your port for the next 30 years like they did in Zambia, I think, yes. Or Zimbabwe. Yeah, but Zambia, but the reason why I say maybe moving away from, China might not be ideal. Jimmy Wanjigi, I think, broke down the whole deal with the Chinese, which was, it was basically the officials that were representing Kenya through Huru's government and the Chinese government, who are kind of playing, they kind of play the people. But anyway, I just wanted to mention the Russia part of it, because I think Russia has a better deal as far as dealing with Africa. Because remember, I always mention here, remember when Putin said, if I want to, make France crumble, all I have to do is just free the West African guys economically, and they'll crumble, because they depend heavily on West African, what do you call it? Resources. Now, the reason why I say Russia is because of this. Russians, yes, you remember they, forgave most of the African nations, their loans. Then number two, they said, okay, we are going to help you. We are going to help you get on your feet, like the Sahel nations. If you need military help, we shall help you. Kick off the Russians. Kick off the French. Kick off the Americans. Then maybe, out of what you make on this gold that you guys now are producing and, selling it at your own prices, we just want maybe 10% out of that to pay for, the military that we helped you with.
Okay, great point here. So let me cook a little bit and give a slightly alternative point of view. If you look at Central African Republic, Russia did go in there. They did liberate the country in the sense that they were able to create some kind of peace and stability. That's all facts. However, if you look at the aftermath, Wagner, right, and this is why Russia is smart in a sense as well. They utilize a mercenary group that they can't be legally, according to international law, be linked to the Russian state, even though they obviously are very linked. So Wagner went and actually took a lot of the gold mines and sold a lot of the gold worth billions of dollars in order, again, there's nothing wrong with that in paper, in principle, if that's how they decided to get paid. But what I'm trying to say is this is not the 10% legal sort of agreement after the mines have already been created that you mentioned. So check out Central African Republic. There's a case study there, and yes, Wagner again. Russia can separate themselves from that paramilitary group. But go ahead.
Yeah, now I think they've changed. Now they're part of they're officially an extension of the Russian army right now. They are no longer Wagner. But what I was saying is this: yes, of course, they're not the only ones who do that. There's Bancroft and Blackwater who are doing the same thing in Congo, and Chinese also doing the same thing. I'm not saying that that's okay, but I'm just using the Sahel nations as the case study here. That's when they're giving that the 10%. They're not taking control of the mines and the cotton production in Burkina Faso, whether it's the uranium that the French were in control of. Now that Burkina Faso are in control of it, they only have to pay a certain percentage to the Russians for helping them, kick up the terrorists and all that stuff. It's no longer they're not doing it the same way they did as in Central Africa, which you've mentioned. And I think that's a better way of helping Africa, at least a step forward, because I think of Africa as a baby economically. We need we need to have a military that is strong enough to defend itself, because we can't fight this British through their terrorists and all that stuff. So I think using Russia that way will help us a step forward as we build ourselves up. What do you think about that?
Yes, I agree that there's a potential for us to grow. And also, I wanted to add something that you mentioned. So I believe that the reason why the Central African Republic allows Russia to, rather, allowed Prigozhin to pillage the minerals is because they had bad leadership. So the unique case is not that Russia is good. I think the unique case here is that Russia is the most neutral out of these new world powers, and it requires, again, a very heavily nationalistic leaders. For example, these junta leaders from Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, who are politically conscious of the people. They have that Sankara spirit. So if you now merge Russia's neutrality with, again, good African leaders who care about their people, then you get what we have in the Sahel. Then obviously, if we get the corrupt leaders, you have what happened with Prigozhin in, of course, the Central African Republic. But again, as you mentioned, right now, Wagner is now controlled by is an extension of the army. So Russia has to be smart how it plays. Before, Prigozhin was doing whatever he wanted for the most part. So yeah, that's a new and interesting sort of perspective. Now, let me answer your question.
Yes.
Do I think that Russia ultimately will lead to us gaining independence? I believe there is a possibility. However, right, I don't necessarily agree with Niger's decision to kick out the American troops so early onwards without securing something further, because we've seen this happen before with Congo, and all those kinds of things. Again, I pray that things will go the right way, but I do think we were slightly too eager. Kicking out the French, great, but kicking out America would mean that now CIA troops will be there working. And of course, he says that they're recruiting Africans. It's not longer just Americans, right? So they will be recruiting Africans to work for them. And all I can say is this: with this new deal that Niger has with Iran as well for drones and also potentially for uranium, power, like nuclear power, which is good because, as you see, ECOWAS, the West African regional body, is a coup, right? These are, Tinubu was told by France to put sanctions on countries for wanting freedom, and they did it. So right now, if you look at what's happening with Russia's security mission, with Iran's potential contracts for generators and energy and nuclear power, this would make these nations not need ECOWAS as much, which will basically allow them to now be able to develop, especially since, right, they have uranium mines. Again, there's also talks of lithium within places like Niger, as there are in Nigeria, etc. So this will allow them, if they unionize correctly with their resources, to gain power. And yes, I do believe Russia is helping. The only problem I see here with any of these foreign powers in Africa is Kenya is now a non-NATO major ally. Now, in the Sahel, you have Russia. In Sudan, you have the UAE and Russia and America. So I don't want there to be a post-Cold War global conflict where Africa now takes center stage. That's the only thing that I'm going to have to kind of watch and be wary over.
Yeah, I agree with you. But in fact, there was a clip of a U.S. general who made the same, echo the same sentiments that you said. He said that Africa is the new war ground for World War III or whatever the case is. I'm just paraphrasing. But here's what I see it at the plus side, if you were to be optimistic about this. I think in order to be liberated, we go through stages. And like I mentioned, the Russia and Iran, let me use Russia. They are the best option, as I say, because they're not involved so much. They're like, okay, we are going to help you with your security. Yes, I agree with you that CIA will still be lurking around, and they're doing that. I mean, how many assassination attempts does that Burkina Faso, whatever, Traore has survived? It's going to happen. It's going to be there. That's something that he'll have to live with. But in the meantime, that should not be a reason to stop. I actually support the fact that he kicked out Americans. Now, once Burkina Faso gets to a point where their security forces are, they can actually handle it by themselves, then they can make those huge decisions and, let's say, phase off this Russian hand and Iranian deals, and make their own whatever. That's why they already have their Sahel Federation. I think I believe you read that about that. They say they're not going to deal with ECOWAS anymore. They are creating their own Sahel Federation, which will have their own currency that is backed by gold. Yeah, so I think that's a good step. It's kind of like, they are, creating their own independent West African economic bloc that maybe in the future, if they can, find allies in the East. Well, actually, as long as we are still stuck with America, we're not going to do that. But
it's actually better.
Anyway, back to Kenya as we wrap. Yeah, go ahead. No, go.
Can you
go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
You something to say.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, but the connection is a bit slow.
Yes.
Am I audible now? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, so I would like to say that it's actually more than good, right? The reason I say it's more than good is that AES, right, this new regional body for security and also economic integration by the Sahel states, is having more potential than any other regional body because they're free from neocolonialism, right? Because everyone talks about neocolonialism, and this is where it actually has a logical consequence. ECOWAS had Ivory Coast, which is a francophone country that refused to actually integrate to create a single currency, and that delayed that project. Right now, they have 3 countries with no foreign masters or anyone that they owe money to in any kind of sense, so they can actually do it. So what I'm seeing here is potentially, if not for EAC, this new AES from the Sahel states will be the first to create a new currency, and I think that is actually more than good.
In my last question, sorry. My power is there. How should Kenya deal with the... I'm sorry, my power is going off. Sorry. How should Kenya liberate itself from this colonial puppet that we have in Ruto? What way should we go? Should we call the Russians, or should we just Gen Z, as you know, are making a lot of noise? They want Ruto out. How will this pan out from where you sit? Is it the people who are going to remove this president through popular revolution, or do they need outside help? Maybe Putin?
So I obviously live in Nairobi, so I can't make a commentary on that specific thing question,
fair
unfortunately.
Enough. Okay, fair enough. Well, are you going to Mandamano on Tuesday?
Yes, definitely.
All right, Kazarian, I'll have to stop here. Today there's a big game I have to prepare, but I really like your views. Please subscribe if you're not subscribed yet. I don't know what to do with you. Okay? Subscribe, like, and I want you to be one of our everyday panelists if you can, every time you can. Thank you so much for your view. My computer is like dying literally, so I have to end this.
Okay,
but anyway, everybody, yeah, no problem. Anytime. Subscribe, like, and do all the good stuff. And you guys on the chat, please. UFC, you came in too late. I'm just finishing, but you can subscribe and like. I'll bring you guys next time I come in. It's been 48 minutes. Thank you so much, everyone. Be safe out there, and may the best team win today between Spain and England, and also Argentina versus Colombia. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys later. Peace and blessings.